Um, I did cook for a while at a retreat center in Alberta when I lived there, with a Mennonite woman who made everything from scratch and grew a lot of her own vegetables. So I've seen the value of that. And I felt that when we started the culinary program that the best thing about it was that it would help people who didn't have great cooking skills to eat well and affordably. And I think that's one of the big obstacles that nutritionists face, is that people just don't know how to cook, or they're not interested, or they don't have time. But all the recipes I make are relatively simple and also nutritious and colorful, and I hope you will find them delicious as well.
I mean, it wasn't as different as going to Southeast Asia, for example. That was really cool. But I was really young, so I wish I took cooking classes there. And I enjoyed eating, but I didn't really learn how to cook there. So
yeah, get to that in a minute. So just all these different chemicals are what you're finding in all your different foods, and you'll come across these terms throughout any kind of nutritional research or writing. So polyphenols are the kind of subcategory of phytonutrients that include things like resveratrol. You may have heard of that. There was a big thing about how everybody should be drinking red wine because resveratrol is found in grapes and in wine, and it has some cardiovascular benefits. And then all these flavonoids are the other ones that you'll find references to throughout your reading and your course. And a lot of the things that are really colorful are also anti-inflammatory and have antioxidants in them. So they're reducing cell damage that can accelerate the aging process. So anthocyanins in berries and things, carotenoids in carrots and orange colored foods, and catechins are things that you'll find in, that's the sort of beneficial compound in things like tea. And quercetin is something that you find a lot in onions and garlic and stuff like that. And tannins are kind of off to the side. They're what really give you astringency in wine, but they're not so nutritionally beneficial. So I think they sometimes get called an anti-nutrient, but I think wine lovers would have a problem with that. So I'll come back to that in a bit. So then we have, let's see what else. So we've got color, we've got texture, and so there are a lot of different textures in the foods we're making today. So it really gives your sensory tissues a workout, and it makes food more pleasurable if you're eating things with different textures. And then flavors. Flavors are a really interesting one. It has something to do with culture. Some cultures prefer flavors. Some cultures actually have a genetic predisposition to culture. One of the things I learned in Italy was that, well, from our Italian instructor, was that Italians are genetically predisposed to enjoy more bitter foods. But I think that's cultural as well. There's an author called Harold McGee, who wrote an amazing book called Kitchen Culture. He's like a food scientist and food writer, and that's a real classic book that explains all the chemistry of food. But he's just written one called Nosedive that's all about flavor. And I heard him talk, and I was able to ask the question, like, is something like a predisposition to bitter foods, is that genetic or is that cultural? And he said it's actually both. You have over 400 sensory sensory receptors in your mouth, but nobody uses them all. So it kind of depends in a way how you're made, but also what you've been eating as you grew up. So it's a whole other interesting area. And we're going to talk a little bit about seasonal and local eating. That was something that has really become very popular, seasonal and local eating. It's meant to be better for your body if you're eating seasonally. That's a really hard thing to kind of capture if you think about how many people come from immigrant backgrounds or from different, different ethnic combinations genetically. So, what does seasonal eating really mean if you've moved here from somewhere else? But I think you adapt. I think your body adapts to the culture and the location that you're in. And one thing I learned when I was in Italy, we did field trips, and one of the ones we did was in Crete in the springtime. And everywhere we went, we were served the same things. We got some kind of stewed goat meat. We got artichokes. We got broad beans. We got fava beans. We got potatoes, and they were all in different sort of the same sorts of combinations. And people were kind of whining to the guy taking us around, and he said, "That's what it means to eat seasonally. There's repetition, but it's cyclic. So you're going through the seasons." And we've kind of knocked ourselves sideways in this day and age because we rely so much on global food. So we're not really eating seasonally anymore. We're buying our blueberries from Chile in the middle of winter, and we're eating oranges in the summer and things like that. So we've kind of lost our connection to our food sources. So if you can try to cultivate a taste and an affinity for local eating, wherever you are, and whatever that means to you, you'll have better cues as to what's happening seasonally and be able to match that up better. Now, Vivian wanted me to touch on some points as well, like macronutrient balance. So all of these things have to be in balance when you're eating. So the micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals that we're getting from our food. And they're never going to be the same as getting them from a pill, because nature does a lot of the work for us by including sort of, I don't know if you want to call them formulas, but the people who are really into food combining will tell you that there are ways of getting better nutrients out of foods. For example, vegans, for example, have a lot of trouble getting enough iron out of plant foods, and it really depends what they're eating with the iron containing foods, because non-heme iron is harder to absorb than heme iron that you would get from animal foods. And so some things can block it, and some things can enhance absorption. So for example, vitamin C enhances absorption of iron. So you'd want to try to combine maybe some lemon juice with your spinach or whatever. So there are lots of examples of that, eating kale and greens with oil, hence our fondness for salads. And then macronutrients, we are looking at protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And those get messed around with a lot by diets like keto and paleo, where someone with a particular kind of diet that they're promoting will tell you that you have to have a certain strict percentage of each of those. And I think I prefer the world of intuitive eating more than being restricted to those kinds of balances. They can really work well for people who are after a particular nutritional objective, but I think sticking long-term to a kind of arbitrary fixed balance is not going to be helpful to your very natural body. So you have to use some common sense, and also just to be really in tune with your own body and how it responds to different foods. And she wanted me to talk about cooling and warming. I have to say this is not my area. That that has more to do with Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, which is not my point of view here. There are lists. You'll find lots of information online if you want to pursue this, and it's probably in the CSNN books as well. Warming and cooling foods. So they don't necessarily have a strictly warming and cooling effect on your body, in that eating cherries will make you feel warmer and eating bananas will make you feel cool. It's more complicated than that, and I'm not going to attempt to explain it in full, but there are felt to be beneficial effects from understanding what your deficiencies are and what foods will help to rebalance those. And that's where Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine comes in, and they have sort of conditions that will respond better to some of these things. So we'll have a look at some of the ingredients that we're using today in terms of whether they're warming or cooling. And if you balance them, then hopefully you'll be on the right track. Something that's always difficult about these traditions, this is more of like a nutritional tradition, is that you won't find identical lists everywhere. There's always a little bit of disagreement, and I hope that you've been well informed that no nutritionist ever agrees with any other nutritionist exactly, but we have kind of general principles that we agree on, hopefully. And that the acid alkaline theory is one that I think you'll find creeps into a lot of the teachings at CSNN. It's been taught in naturopathic schools forever, and it whether you believe it wholesale or not, it basically reflects the kind of diet that I think most of us would agree was a healthy diet. So alkaline foods tend to be the ones that people are wanting to eat more of. And so fruits, vegetables, fresh fruit, fresh foods, grasses rather than grains, as opposed to acid foods, which they just recommend that you limit your consumption of. And the whole theory of acid and alkaline has to do with wanting to have an overall alkaline load on our body rather than an acidic one, which it is felt will make us vulnerable to all the modern diseases like cancer and diabetes and osteoporosis. So the people who follow this really strictly often use pH strips to test the alkalinity or acidity of their urine or saliva. And I'm just not sure how well that actually works scientifically. But in a way, it doesn't really matter, because these would be foods we would recommend, whether we believed they were alkaline or not. So you can adopt that in any way that works with your studies and your beliefs. And I think, just take it with a grain of salt, I guess, like everything in nutrition. I think the wonderful thing about the CSNN program is that you get so many different perspectives from so many different instructors and so many different readings that by the end of the program, you're left with a whole lot of contradictory information running around in your head. And it's really up to you to sort out what makes the most sense to you and to the conditions that you're dealing with. So in this case with acid and alkaline, I went to a talk by Chris Kresser, who's a sort of nutrition blogger. And he said, actually the thing that regulates acid and alkaline in the body is your kidneys. Acid and alkaline in your blood is your kidneys. So testing your urine isn't going to tell you that much. And it's not really he doesn't really feel that it holds water, but I don't think he would dispute that any of these foods would be good things to aim for. So as I say, whether you want to follow it strictly or not, it's all good. It's all good to know about. So lemon alkaline and lime acidic. I don't really know how those distinctions are made. It has to do with the residues that are they talk about the ash, the alkalinity or acidity of the ash residue left behind when it's burned or something. That's why I'm not really a follower of this. But you can find lots of sources, and again, you'll find the lists of acid and alkaline foods often contradict each other. So that's why it's a little bit hard to follow these things exactly. So you have to kind of find your teacher and your mentors and make what you can of them. But it's just basically acidic foods would be like meat, poultry, fish, dairy, eggs, grains, and alcohol, things that we would want to normally probably limit. And then alkaline being fruits, nuts, legumes, and vegetables. I used to laugh and say that it was a vegan conspiracy because all the foods that were on the alkaline side were in a vegan diet. But it's really, finding balance in how you want to eat. So I'm just going to turn my oven on before I forget. I have a really old oven and it doesn't like to be told what to do anymore. This could make for interesting times. Okay, I got it. It's under control. Okay, so I'm just wondering how many people might be cooking along with me today. Anybody? Yay, Sandra. Anyone else going to be attempting any of these recipes? Okay, it's down to you and me, Sandra. Hopefully we will inspire them to do it themselves later. Okay, so we are taking a little culinary tour today through Italy, then going Afro-Caribbean, and then hopefully to Syria as well. And as I mentioned, I spent some time in Italy, and just about the first thing they told me was, there is no such thing as Italian food. Because Italy only became a country fairly late in the day, I think like 1870 or something like that. And it's really regional cuisine. So it's kind of hard to generalize. And I think what we think of in North America as Italian food tends to be Southern Italian, because the people in Southern Italy, even like in the late, I guess in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who immigrated to North America, because they were so poor. It was a very impoverished area, and so you got a lot of people from Naples, hence our pizzas, and a lot of the Southern Italian foods that way. So we are coincidentally having a Southern Italian food today, this one from Calabria, which is in the south. I wanted to just show you a few books before I get too far in. I have a library science degree, and I am a bookaholic, I guess you could say. So, beginning with this one, Claudia Roden is I'll just maybe spotlight that so you can see it better. Claudia Roden is a very well-known food writer. Boom. she is. And this is one of her books. She's a really dedicated researcher into different foods. She's written on a lot of different areas. The famous book on Jewish cuisine, but this is her Italian one. And as I mentioned, all the Italian food is actually regional cuisine. So she's got it broken down by region. And that's what Italy looks like if we've forgotten, because we can't get there anymore. So Calabria is down in the toe of the boot. And so there's that one. Where I studied, though, I was in northern Italy. So I got this book before I went to Italy and tried a few of the recipes. So this is a very different cuisine from southern Italy. It's got a lot of kind of heavier foods, pork and broths. And this is where Parma ham comes from, and Parmesan cheese. So I was actually living in Parma, so we got to have a lot of Parmesan cheese and Parma ham when we were there. And this was quite a good book. I think the Splendid Table was a television series, but I never saw it. I just picked up the book randomly. And just some fun books that I found. This one is called The Flavor Thesaurus. So if you ever have a food and you don't know what to do with it, you think, oh gosh, what am I going to do with all this leftover cucumber? So she actually gives you a whole lot of combinations. And one of the spices we're looking at today is cumin. I think I found she had cumin listed in here. And it's quite a fun look at different foods. So she says cumin, she's describing the smell, and she says they're dry, woody, and musty. Inhale from the jar and you may recall the note in bought curry powder that smells like the inside of a secondhand wardrobe. So it's quite fun to read. It's very entertaining. And she gives little recipes and things in it. So that's quite nice. Her name is Nikki Segnick. And then I found that she'd written this other one called Lateral Cooking. I guess I can hold it sideways. And that one is where she says, you know, you can sort of follow your nose in making different foods. So it's kind of it's a nice one to try to find from your library and see if you can make sense of it. So she's just talking about all different kinds of foods like bread, batter, stock, custard, and she just gives you ways of improvising around those foods. So it's a nice gift one. So if you want to ask for something for Christmas, that might be a good one. And then, boy, this one I came across recently, Food Substitutions Bible, and that's quite a handy one. So especially if you don't live near a store, or maybe you are in lockdown because of a global pandemic or something, it gives you ways to improvise around what things you might have on hand if you're missing a crucial key ingredient. It's not written for holistic nutritionists, but it's pretty helpful. And it's got some good tables at the end, ingredient guides. So there's one here about choosing chilies, and it tells you how hot they are. So if you don't have a ancho chilies or chipotle, he'll offer some alternatives that you might be able to use instead. But he's got it all presented in little tables like that. So and he gives recipes for making equivalents. So if you don't have mint chutney, what can you do? Hasn't been a problem for me yet, but it's pretty interesting reading too. And because we're going to be talking about different cuisines, a good place to start is a book on spices or herbs and spices. So This was one I got for Christmas from a very nice friend. It's called The Grammar of Spice, and it's a really beautiful kind of coffee table book. It's just really beautifully designed. But it gives you some history around the different spices and then what cultures use them and what they're used for. So it's not focusing very well. So that and these are really good books too. Like any good book on herbs and spices will give you some cultural history, and that will help you to understand what herbs and spices are characteristic of a particular region. So if you're trying to cook internationally, this one has a lot of exotic ones, but it's a Dorling Kindersley book, and Dorling Kindersley does really beautifully photographed books as a rule, and they're very clear to read. One's by Jill Norman, and I've got the book list at the end of my little PowerPoint, so Vivian can send that around to you. Oh, and when I left England, I bought myself this monster edition, Culinaria. You'll have seen these books around maybe in secondhand stores or elsewhere. They've done a lot of different cuisines. This was one to remind me of my European travels. And these are European specialties. So they are extraordinarily beautiful books. And I found them very accurate as well. When I was looking for, a recipe for something I'd had in a particular country, the recipes I found were really accurate and authentic, I think. So they give you beautiful pictures. They're very heavy books because the quality is so good, but they give you some history. This is one of a particular dessert wine in Hungary that I was very fond of. So, but all kinds of things. So it's very, very lovely. But you can find individual volumes for different countries. So if you're looking for a particular cuisine, you could probably use one of those. Okay, so let's see. I could get started. My oven has just come up to temperature, so I'm going to get my little cauliflower. I appreciated in this recipe that she gave the weight of the cauliflower, because when they don't give you the weight of something, they just say get a medium something or other. You don't really know what that means. So in this case, I've got a piece of a large cauliflower. I'm making this just for myself, so I thought I would reduce the amounts a bit. So I took a chunk off a big one. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to slice it into pieces so that I can put it on a baking sheet and caramelize it. So it says to have flat sides, and so that those edges can go on the sheet and caramelize. And caramelizing is really, it's where the sugars kind of heat up and make a sweetness that humans really like. It's something called the Maillard effect. It's why toast is brown. It's just when you heat glucose to a certain temperature, it will brown. So I have chopped it up a little bit, not quite the way I was meant to, but I just kind of like the shape of these. So I can just rip those into pieces. And I have already rinsed this cauliflower. And since it's only me eating, I'm not going to worry too much about the manhandling of it. But it's kind of nice to have big pieces. I think it looks prettier, but you can cut it up any way you like as long as you've got some flat pieces. So there we go. That up. Okay. And I have, I didn't mince any garlic. It's early in the season for garlic. Garlic usually ripens around here in July, but I have something called green garlic that's growing in my garden. And I planted some bulbs around my rose bushes because it's supposed to help keep them safe from pests and diseases. And they've just kind of carried on growing every year. So I use this in the spring when I'm looking for garlic. And I chopped some up. I have a bowl somewhere here. So I am going to put it's asking for 2 cloves for a full batch. I'm just going to put in a little bit for my purposes. And some olive oil. Put down here. Okay, so something I learned in Italy about olive oil. This is the one I use for everyday cooking just because it's organic, it's relatively easy to find, and it's relatively inexpensive. It's from Tunisia. And olive oil, because it's such a big business, tends to get adulterated in some cases. So people will put cheaper oils in with extra virgin olive oil. So it's a kind of a matter of faith. It should have some kind of, I think this red one is the mark from the Olive Oil Consortium that's supposed to monitor the purity of it. So it's a reliable product. It's not the very, very best, but it's pretty good. So I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of that in there. And the thing that, okay, so the thing that I learned was that in Italy, where people are passionate about their olive oil, it's more common to find on the side. You won't find it on this one, but there would be a sort of handwritten label on the side saying harvest date. And that will show you how fresh it is. Olive oil in Italy and the Mediterranean is harvested in November. And so you're looking for something that was harvested around then. If you're getting it from South America, you would have to kind of invert the timing to get the freshest olive oil, because you really want to get it as fresh as possible. It's what my olive oil instructor said, is it's a living thing. It will never be better than it is today. So as fresh as possible. The ones you get in North America tend mostly, unless you're buying a premium one from a specialty shop, to just have a best before date. And so you have an estimate of when it was picked, but it could have had more than one harvest, like more than 1 year's harvest combined with it. And what happens when you heat it is it loses a lot of the volatile oils that give it so much flavor. So it's better to keep your very best olive oil for using in salad dressings and for dressing things at the end of your cooking. So I've got some for that purpose set aside. So I have put olive oil, and I just need to grind some pepper in there. I found this very cool salt and pepper shaker that has salt on one side and pepper on the other. I just have to remember which way I'm grinding. Okay. Just stir that a bit and cut things up a little bit. And I'm just going to toss them around in that before I put them in the oven. Putting my knife down so I don't stab myself. Make sure that that all gets a good coating of oil. I'm just giving it a little bit of a turn here. So because I've got the green garlic, I'm getting a little bit of greenery in as well, which shouldn't make any difference. I'm going to just add a little bit more oil. And I'm going to put that on a parchment paper lined baking sheet, which I have prepared over here. And parchment paper is not to be confused with wax paper. You'll only do that once. Wax paper is just paper with a kind of wax coating. Parchment paper is more durable, and it will last through considerable heat. It can go up to about 450 or whatever if you're using Fahrenheit without burning, and it also keeps things from sticking. And if it doesn't get too messy, you can actually wipe it off or wash it off and use it again. We do this a lot in baking because you often want to use that under breads or cookies or things that are going to possibly stick to a baking sheet on their own. So, shake. So there we are. I'm going to put that in, and it's going to have to roast for about 10 minutes. And then while I'm waiting for that, I can make the dressing with the rest of the olive oil and the other ingredients. So recipe advised me to scrape up the little bits and pieces to put in later. I have about 1,000 little glass bowls that I use for all kinds of things, so I'll do that. This is a very flexible recipe, and I think I said it's a great potluck recipe because it doesn't have to be chilled or served at a particular moment. So I need some olive oil. Because I'm making a dressing that's not going to be heated, I have some slightly better olive oil. I found some Kalamata olive oil in my local deli, and this comes from Kalamata olives, which are the same olives I'm going to be using. I hope that you're familiar with Kalamata olives. If you've had a Greek salad, you've probably had them. They're quite large and quite elongated and quite flavorful. So that's the olive of choice for this recipe. There's another one called Gaeta olives. There's many different kinds of olives, but what you're aiming for is something that's quite flavorful. And those are two varieties that would work. And I did warn against using black olives, the kind that you find in supermarket shelves just in a can, because those are just green, somewhat unripe olives that have been treated with lye to oxidize them and turn them black. So that's why they don't really taste like much. These ones are aged more carefully, They're soaked in a brine, and that's actually one of the problems with the olive oil industry, is that when you soak them in brine, you have to kind of change the brine because there's a substance on olives that is not very good to eat. What's it called? Oleopain, I think. And so olive producers then have this wastewater that they have to dispose of, and it can be quite challenging to dispose of it. So I've just taken the pits out of enough olives for this dish, and I'm going to just chop those up a bit more. You just chop them up as much as you want. So I was looking on the warming and cooling list, and all I could find really was cauliflower, which is a cooling food. But we're putting red pepper flakes into. I can't know. I don't think I saw those on the list, but cayenne pepper was on there. I think it was under. I think it was under warming, but in fact, a lot of hot cultures use chili pepper as a way to cool down, because it stimulates your blood system to it stimulates the capillaries under your skin to expand, and so then heat evaporates from that. So it actually does have a cooling effect. Okay, so I have chopped those up. And I am going to carefully measure, let's see, a tablespoon of olive oil. I'm going to put it right into the same bowl because it is all going in the same place. So a tablespoon of oil. And I am to whisk this with, trying to remember, with the parsley, olives, capers, lemon juice, and red pepper flakes. So I had squeezed out some lemon juice earlier into a nice little jar. When I lived in England, I used to get my yogurt in these little pots, and they came with lids. And I found some yogurt here that came in those glass jars. They're very handy. They're for just about anything you could ever want to stash in your fridge. And they don't spill when you tip them over, which is very nice. So I need about 3/4 of a tablespoon, according to my records here. But like everything, it's to taste. So just try that much for starters. And I've got my capers in a little bowl here, so I'll just throw those in. And I chopped my parsley as well. Put that in. And just give that a little whisk before I in the olives. So now I have a messy little pile of olives and capers and lemon juice. And I bought some smoked chili flakes. I thought those would be kind of fun. And they look like that. So I thought they would add a little bit of warmth of different kinds. So I'm just going to put a bit of those in. Don't want it to be too spicy, but a little bit of a boost would be nice. And will be that. So here we go. So see how my cauliflower is doing. So it's just basically steaming away. It hasn't really browned on the bottom yet, so I'm going to give it a bit more time and then turn it. Are there any questions about anything so far? It's pretty straightforward. I thought that that it would be nice to have salads today because it's spring. Salads feel kind of springy to me. While we're waiting for that to finish, I can talk a little bit about what's coming up and plantains and things. So I have a couple of plantains to show you. This one has been sitting in the bowl for a week or so, so it's got very dark and ripe. And this is the one I'll be using for the plantain and avocado salad. Plantains are like bananas, but not. They don't have the same strong flavor, and they are not as sweet as bananas. This one will be getting sweeter. Like bananas, as they age, they do get sweeter and softer. This one started out as all green, but it's now reached just basic ripeness. It's hard to find a good variety of plantains in Victoria. There doesn't seem to be huge demand for them here, but I was impressed to find them at Whole Foods and a couple of bigger grocery stores here. So they're a very popular starch food used in African cuisine and also in the Caribbean and in South America. Has anyone ever eaten plantain before? Yeah, Sandra, how did you eat it before?
I think they were sweeter, but it was still in like along beans and rice and things like that. But then in Colombia, they were more like they were double mashed, like smashed twice and refried. I don't know
Yep.
how they prepared it, but yeah, this one was a little saltier. But yeah, they're delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're that's can't remember what are they called, tostones, something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're double cooked. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to mash it finely, and I'm going to add ginger and garlic, and then I'm going to make them into pancakes. They're really good, and they go really nicely with curry, actually. So one of my inspirations for this part of the dish was this book here, Zoe's Ghana Kitchen. So it's Ghanaian cuisine, and she has a little section on plantains, different at different ripeness. So she has plantain five ways. So the thing about plantains nutritionally is, like bananas, they have magnesium and potassium as part of them. And depending on what level of ripeness you're eating them at, they will have greater or lesser amounts of resistant starch. I don't know if you've covered that in any of your classes or readings, but resistant starch is starch that your body basically doesn't digest, so it passes through you. And of course, the food manufacturers are all over this, trying to come up with delicious starchy foods that are diet foods, because you're not digesting the starches as sugars. Um, the most resistant starch is in green plantains and green bananas. And so it would diminish gradually as the plantain ripened or the banana. I'm not sure if people actually have great ways of cooking green bananas, but I think there are some curry dishes that use them. Plantains, I've been looking at different recipes, and it seems to me that everything that you would gain by having a green plantain and getting all that resistant starch, you would kind of lose in the most popular ways of cooking them, which are usually involve frying or deep frying them. You may have had plantain chips in, like there's a food truck here in the summer that serves plantain chips, and they're really good, but they are deep fried. So you can't have everything every way. But I thought it would be an interesting one to have a look at, just because it's not terribly well known in North American kitchens. So Ramsey says she considers it her favorite starch. How do you cook it, or how do you eat it, Ramsey?
I used to put it in pancakes,
Uh-huh.
and we also take it as a snack. Like we fry it, like we cut into small pieces and dip it into plantain pieces into that mixture and just get coated it with that, and then we put it in the oil and fry it up. So that's yummy. But it's
Yeah.
fried food, but
Yeah.
it's yummy.
Yeah. I was in Newfoundland a few years ago, and they served us cod tongues on a platter. And I said, "What is that?" And she said, "Deep fried goodness." So it sounds like you had some deep fried goodness in the plantains as well.
Um,
Yeah. I had an African boyfriend, and he made some kind of stew, and he used plantain in place of potato, and it was so delicious. I still remember it. It was years ago, but
we
I
also
never
put
got
them
that.
the ripe plantains in smoothies. It tastes yummy. Like
Oh yeah,
we swap it with the actual banana, and we put this in avocado smoothies and all, and it tastes
yeah,
better than when we use banana. I
yeah.
felt it.
Well, it's a more subtle flavor, isn't it? So, but with all the same nutritional benefits. So, I guess one concern around plantains, like bananas, is that bananas are, unless you get organic ones, they are really pretty heavily treated with pesticides and fungicides. So plantains tend to get the same kind of chemical treatment, and I haven't seen any organic plantains. It's such a kind of niche item here that there isn't a demand for it. So they're not gonna do it unless they can sell it. So that's a bit unfortunate, but they are packaged in their own wrapper, so hopefully not too much gets through. Okay, so I've got some browning happening. There's some up there that's quite toasty, so I'm just going to put that in for another 10 minutes or so. I think it's getting pretty tender. I think I'll put my timer on, but I'm going to put it in the other room because it's so loud. Okay. Yeah, I think you can make some nice soups as well. This would probably make, like if you were following a kind of potato soup recipe, you could use plantains in that, and it would go really nicely with curry spices, for example. And Sarah says she's bought green banana flour. And that would be very interesting too. Yeah. I haven't seen that. What do you use the green banana flour for?
I use it in my baking. So it says on the package, I think it's 3/4 a cup is equivalent to a cup of regular flour. So you can just use it for muffins or whatever you want to bake with. And it's high in resistant starch. It's good.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, that probably found a market with the paleo and the keto people. Because there was a kind of demand for resistant starch foods.
Back in India, they give this green banana flour to kids. It's an introductory food to kids.
Because
And
it's tastier or sweeter or something?
It's not tastier. We just add some kind of jaggery or some sweetness to it. And then they give it to kids during their 6 months or something, like an introductory food.
Oh, nice. Great. Yeah, it's probably also it gives them that extra, magnesium boost and things. Got to put my extra little bits of cauliflower onto the pan, so I'm just going to sprinkle those in. Yeah, I'm sure there's a plantain cookbook out there that has my name on it. I'll have to get that next. I had access to a quince tree for a while, so I ended up with a quince cookbook and tried all different kinds of recipes with quince, which is another underused food. So let's see, what shall I do now? So we could just maybe have a go at chopping this up. You kind of have to start it farther up than you would a banana. The ends are a bit. And the recommended way of opening it is just to cut a slit down the side rather than trying to peel it like a banana. That can sometimes go terribly wrong, especially if you're doing a green banana, or a green plantain, which is it's much harder to peel. So there it is. Very perfect. Looks just like a banana. Okay, tuck that away. And I bought a couple of avocados because you just never know whether they're going to be ripe or not. I'm sure you've all seen this trick on social media somewhere where you just take the end off to see whether it's ripe or not. And if it doesn't have kind of green in there, it should be perfectly ripe. So this one has done its time and should be perfect. Okay. Now, for my next trick, I am going to be cooking the plantain. I have a big pan here. I think I'll use a smaller one. And I have olive oil, or coconut oil, I mean. I got this one, which says it's naturally refined. I don't know how one naturally refines oil. I didn't mean to buy naturally refined, but so I'm not going to have the same coconut flavor from my cooking that I would otherwise. And I'm guessing these are going to be a little bit sticky when I cook them. So I'm going to put in Again, I'm going to reduce this. I'm just making this with one plantain, not two, but I'm going to put in a good chunk of oil. For that, and dice my plantain. Just looking at some of the chat here. Yeah, there's Vida says she's had them as oven baked chips. Yeah, it is possible to reduce the deep frying thing by oven roasting in some cases, and oven roasted chips is a good strategy. So just that's about the size I want in my salad. This one is quite a simple salad, but it should have lots of different colors and textures in it that'll make it really interesting. I know what I was going to ask. Trying not to get my computer too mucky. So I was wondering, Ramsey, what part of India you're from?
I'm from Kerala, south part of India.
All right. It's an area known for a particularly delicious cuisine, I am told. Lots of coconut and fresh seafood and lovely, lovely fruits and vegetables. Yeah.
And plantains grow very commonly, like they're everywhere.
Oh,
Just
really?
like coconut. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So one reason I asked was I was just I go on a lot of as I mentioned, cooking workshops and things. And one I went on recently was given by this guy, Nick Sharma. He has a blog, I think it's called Brown Boy or something. But he's written this book called The Flavor Equation. He's a food scientist as well as a cookbook author and a photographer. So it's another very beautiful book. And all his references are really from Indian cuisine, various kinds. And he tries to just explain things in terms of how you get more flavor from your food. So he covers this. He talks about brightness, bitterness, saltiness, sweetness, savoriness, fieriness, richness, and he gives examples of recipes. I don't think he has any plantain recipes, unfortunately, but he uses a lot of Indian ingredients and a lot of really interesting techniques. And so in this workshop, he had us break into breakout rooms and come up with a cookbook proposal. And so one of the cookbooks was an Indian cookbook, and I was in that group. And there was somebody there who was really familiar with India, and so we ended up talking about Kerala actually, and using that as our cookbook proposal. And the other books I have are this rather well-worn copy of Madhur Jaffrey. She's a very well-known name in Indian cookbook writing in England. She's also an actress. And so I've used that a lot. And then I came upon this one too, which has really served me well. 5 spices, 50 dishes. And there's all kinds of fun recipes in there that are relatively simple. And I'm just going to check my cauliflower. Take my pan off the heat. Okay, so my end result is it's not really brown, but I don't want it to be completely brown. There's my spatula. But it's got some nice browned bits in it that will give lots of flavor. Let's see if I can do this without tipping it over. So it's browned rather than burnt, which is nice. And I'm just going to let that cool for a minute while I get the plantain started. It says that it should be, you should be able to pierce it with a fork. I'm using a knife, but it's very perfectly cooked, I think. So I will throw that together when it's had a moment to calm itself down. And now I am going to cook my plantain. When I made this before, I was following a recipe that said I think I had to boil the plantain and then I think I oven roasted it a bit. So I thought I would actually follow the recipe and try frying it a bit in this instance. So how that goes. I don't need a very large pan because it's just one plantain and it wasn't a huge one. So we can just have a look at that. Now, if you want to see. There it is, cooking away. Okay, so that's maybe of limited interest. Sandra, how's yours doing?
It's browning. Yeah, it's browning. The cauliflower is nice. I'm just letting it cool as well.
Great. We'll have to compare how they look at the end. I write poetry as well, and I remember I went to a reading once of somebody who was reading translations, and he said that a translated poem is kind of like a recipe that you give to somebody else, and when they cook it, you may not recognize it. And I found that with recipes, when I've given them to somebody else. I remember one I gave to a friend, and I went over to her house and she served this dish to me, and I said, "Oh, that's very nice. What is that?" And she said, "Oh, that's the recipe you gave me." And I just totally would not have recognized it because she put her own stamp on it. So it's perfectly all right to do that. That's what it's kind of what the whole tradition of recipes has done. You know, it's something that we share and we improvise on, and we change. I always look at the comments in places like epicurious.com where they say, "Oh, this was a great recipe and I changed this and this and this and this." So everybody's trying to perfect it in their own way. It's quite interesting. Now, so I mentioned in the notes about the beans that are going into the plantain salad. These are the beans that I use. They're adzuki beans or aduki beans. Depends how you know, where you get them as to how they spell them. But what's nice about them is they're small and quite soft. And they look like this. I've got them draining here. So those are nice and easy. If I'd been more ambitious, I might have cooked some, soaked them and cooked them, but not today. The nice thing about canned beans is that they are always soft, and there's something called a hard bean syndrome that happens if you have beans that have been stored for a really long time or stored in bad conditions, like too much heat, they're in direct sunlight or something like that, and they heat and cool. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but if you have ever tried to cook beans and they never got soft, that it might not be your fault. Cooking beans with baking soda, that's an interesting idea. Has anybody found that works? I came upon some information about how you can cook beans in a pressure cooker. And I think they may have had baking soda in them. I haven't tried it yet. Yeah, and you know, as you adopt this recipe, you can use any darn color of beans that you want. So black beans would be fine. So I got some jalapeno peppers. In Zoe's Ghana cookbook, she uses Scotch bonnet, which are more popular in Caribbean cooking, I think. I chopped mine up and chopped all my onion up so I wouldn't have to do that now. And I got a nice bowl of tomatoes. I try to eat seasonally as much as I can, so I don't eat tomatoes in the winter because they usually don't taste very good. So I always wait till spring, and I've got a local greenhouse that produces the first tomatoes of the season. They're still not as good as the summer ones, but it's like my treat. I get to have tomatoes again. I haven't found that it's been a big problem. Yeah, kombu is supposed to help when you're cooking beans. Supposed to make them more digestible. For sure. Okay. So my plantains are looking pretty cooked. I'll show you what that looks like again with my other camera. This is a very high-tech kitchen with 3 cameras. I'm actually signed in on my phone for the countertop, and I have a little webcam on the side here to show you what's going on the stovetop. So that looks pretty good. They'll probably be pretty nice to snack on at this point too. Okay. Just let them cool down a bit. So all I need to do is find a salad bowl. And I think I will put the cauliflower into this blue bowl. Once I have tossed it in the dressing. So that actually wasn't too hard on the parchment paper. I can certainly wash that off and use it again. I have a nice peanut butter cookie recipe I've been making that doesn't require any flour, so I might do that. I might turn it over. So tossing it with the other salad dressing ingredients makes it look like this. And I'm going to put it in this bowl. So now I'm ready for my next potluck, which will be maybe sometime in August. The rate we're going here. Okay. So that's my final product. Sandra, is yours done yet?
I'll go mix it up. Give me a minute.
Okay. So I can leave that on the counter here. These guys over here. Okay. And I'll start cutting up some tomatoes. So the batch I got, they had some of these charming little orange ones in addition to the red ones. So I thought that would look nice. Put a few of those in. I got some nice little cucumbers as well. Okay. So that should be about enough.
This is what it looks like.
Let's just spotlight that.
Oh, it's terrible angle, but
There we go.
ta-da!
Yay!
It looks
Very
delicious.
nice. Okay. Okay, so that one there. So I've got my tomatoes. From the same greenhouse, they've got cucumbers already, which is very exciting. And they sell mini cucumbers. So I normally get these baby English cucumbers, and they're very delicious. There's nothing like a fresh cucumber. They're so crunchy. But they also sell something, they just call them Asian cucumbers. So kind of similar to an English cucumber, but longer and leaner. They've got fewer seeds and they're really tasty as well. So I was really pleased they had that. So I'll use one of those, I think, for this. Just give it a little rinse. Okay. It smells really good in here. Love the smell of cucumbers. Okay. And if you get a thin skin variety, I think I said in the notes, it means that you're getting the benefit of what's in the skin and also some more texture and color for your dish. So I've got some jalapeno and I will put this, how much have I got? Yeah, I'll use this bowl, which is not too big. I'm going to use about half of my beans. I think maybe even less. So putting my beans, tomato, onion, and cucumber. I forgot to say cucumber in the description. And a bit of jalapeno. I'm a bit of a wimp where it comes to jalapenos, so I'm just going to use probably a teaspoon for starters and then see how it goes. And then I'm going to get a little bowl. And I always find it a little annoying when you get instructions like the juice of a lime, because limes are all different sizes. So I'm going to try just maybe putting in a tablespoon or two of lime juice and see how that goes. So we juiced that one earlier too. And a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to use my fancy olive oil again. And then it just really depends how sweet the plantains are. Those are about perfect to me. They're really good. But you can put a bit of honey in for sweetness to balance the lime juice. My squeezy bottle will cooperate. I don't like things too sweet, so I'm just going to put a little dollop in there. And then a bit of salt and some pepper. So it's a very simple dressing. And I'm going to put a bit of cumin in there. That ended up on the wrong side of the recipe, I think. Cumin is often found in Afro-Caribbean recipes and Mexican. You've probably seen it in Mexican recipes. And of course, it features in Indian cuisine as well. It's a very versatile spice. One I like a lot. So I'm going to put some in. Have a just a whisk to just all that together. And all I need to do now is chop a bit of avocado. I don't know if anybody's had one of these, what was it, like an avocado knife injury or something that people were getting during the pandemic when everybody had nothing else to talk about. I haven't had that problem yet for some reason. So it is indeed a perfect avocado. I'm very excited about that. I'm just going to do my little chop it up. Oops, put it in the wrong bowl. Just need half of one for this, I think. So you're getting a real meal in this one with the beans and the plantains. So it's quite a hearty salad. So it'll be more like a main dish salad. Let's see. Scrape some of the avocado off the side. Still a bit warm. I love my non-stick pans. They're cast iron pans I've had for ages. I used to be able to get them quite easily in thrift stores until everybody figured out what a good thing they were. So there we go. And what I'm going to need to do is just add a bit of cilantro to the end. But lots of beautiful colors and textures in here. So it's a meal and a half. When I went to that cooking school in Santa Fe, I think it was kind of a shtick of his. He was telling us how the best way to keep our herbs fresh was, and he just put them into jars. And then he whipped open his fridge and showed us what looked like a little greenhouse because he had them all sitting there. But I found that this works really well because cilantro goes off so fast. But if you just put it in water like it was a cut flower and then cover it with a plastic bag, it will keep really well and nice and fresh. So I'll just cut up a bit of that. And cilantro is one of those foods that some people can't stand the taste of. They think it tastes like soap. And that can actually be partly genetic. Well, actually, I think it's entirely genetic. So we're using cold pressed hemp oil instead of olive for the dressing. That sounds nice. Yeah, why not? I would just say experiment with whatever you enjoy because it's your food and it will be your recipe, and you can tweak it any way that works for you. One thing that recipe writers say is they would like you to make their recipes according to their instructions first because that's how it's been tested and they know it works and it tastes the way that they intended it to taste. But after you've tried it once and got the hang of it, it's over to you. So we're saying mint instead of cilantro. Yeah, that could be really interesting, actually. So remember to make the claw when you're chopping. I usually do. The stems actually have quite a lot of flavor and fiber and texture in them, so I often include those, but in this instance, I'm going to just make it leafy. Maybe just dress it like that. So there's my supper. And I can just go in there. So, very colorful. And another one where you don't have to, time it properly or have it chilled perfectly or anything like that. It's just a good all-purpose salad. And it tastes really good too. So those are our salads. My hands are rinsed. Okay, now the other recipe I was going to do if we had time, which I think we do, is a red pepper dip called muhamara. And when I was first introduced to this, it was one of the instructors at CSNN in Nanaimo. And she made it and said it was, I think she said it was Turkish, which it is, but it's also found in Lebanese cuisine, and it's also found in Syrian. And when I researched it a little further, it actually appears to have originated in Aleppo, which I don't know if you remember was in the news for bad reasons some years ago when it was under sustained attack during the Syrian war. And so I kind of wonder whatever happened to Aleppo pepper, because the town was really destroyed, I think. I'm not sure what the status is now, but it's a really good dip to do if you get tired of hummus. It's gluten-free, dairy-free, and it's really good with vegetables as well as any dips or chips or anything like that you want to use. And it's very simple to make. You just need something to grind everything up with. And the originators of the recipe would probably tell you to use a mortar and pestle to get a kind of coarse consistency, but I am very fond of my food processors, so that's what I'm going to use in it. And I'll just maybe move some of these things out of the way. Give my board a rinse. And I don't actually have to do much cutting because my food processor will do the work. Okay. Now, some of you may have roasted peppers before. I decided to just use canned peppers this time, and so I got a jar of peppers that had been roasted, and all the work has been done for me, so that makes it easy. I got some pomegranate molasses, which is quite delicious. It is pomegranate and sugar, concentrated pomegranate juice and sugar. So you use just a little bit of that, and it adds tartness and sweetness and fruitiness, which is quite nice. When I've made this before, I've used something called sapa. So I had a friend with a grapevine, some red grapes with seeds in them. It was maybe not great eating grapes. So I found a recipe in that Northern Italian cookbook that I mentioned earlier. She mentioned sapa. And basically that's just boiled down or cooked down grapes. And it has a very similar quality. So pomegranate molasses you can get in just about any Mediterranean deli. It's a very widely used condiment. It's quite thick. And you don't have to use pomegranate molasses. If you can't find that, a combination of honey and lemon juice will work. Balsamic vinegar will give you a similar effect as well. But this is a sort of authentic Middle Eastern ingredient. What else have I got in here? Got garlic, cumin again. And I mentioned Aleppo pepper flakes. I really wanted to find some. There's something called the Damascus grocery store that opened up here. It was some Syrian emigres who moved into town and started a store. So I was pretty sure I could find some there, but it's a family enterprise, and so they don't always keep regular hours. So they were closed the day I was trying to get in there. So I don't have Aleppo pepper flakes, but I would really like to find some to try them because I keep reading about them in different recipes. And I've also added a little bit of sumac, which is, it adds a real, a little bit of tartness as well. And I've got amchar powder, which is mango powder basically, and it is a very similar thing. It can add a little bit of tartness if you don't want to add something like lemon juice or something to a recipe. Those are two good options to do to just brighten things up. And then the rest are pretty easy to find. So I've got some walnuts, and I did toast them in the oven. You'll find a lot of recipes that involve nuts and things like walnuts suggest that you cook them in this not an overly hot oven because you don't want to burn them, but it just allows the flavors to release a bit. So I'm actually going to put the whole cup in there because I'm feeling rash today. So I'll put some walnuts in there, and I'm going to add some red peppers. Well, maybe not. It depends if I can open the jar or not. I have one of these things, which is very helpful if you get a sticky jar. And if that doesn't work, you break the seal by banging the lid or by thumping it on the top. There, that worked. And I am going to get a fork. So peppers, you'll find on the Dirty Dozen list. They are one of the crops that does get pesticide use on them. So let's see, that looks like one very large pepper. But one of my teachers indoctrinated me with the 80-20 rule. She said, you eat 80% good stuff, you can get away with another 20% not so good stuff. So this isn't something I would eat every day. You can find organic peppers. You can roast them yourself. It's pretty easy. You just put them in a hot oven until they char and then put them in a plastic bag when they're cooling, and then the skin comes off really easily. So you can do that yourself. And I usually buy some in the summer and can them myself, so I know exactly what I've got. So it is possible to avoid the kind of pesticide version of peppers, because they are very delicious. And then I'm going to use, as well, keep using my nice olive oil. And I need 1/4 cup of that. So it's getting all kinds of good oils. Olive oil is an excellent oil, particularly if it's organic and extra virgin. The difference between extra virgin and just regular olive oil that you would find in a supermarket is that extra virgin comes from the first pressing of the olives. So it's kind of got the most oomph to it, the most nutrients. And regular or unlabeled or not virgin or extra virgin olive oil is refined with chemicals usually, and it's more likely to be adulterated with other oils. So extra virgin is what you really would want to get. Now I'm going to add my pomegranate molasses. It does look like molasses, but it tastes really good. I think it would be really good in salad dressings as well. One of my my neighbors here developed diabetes, and she had been making shrub. She'd taken fruits and then sort of macerated them and cooked them down in vinegar, and it really absorbs the flavor of the fruit, and it preserves it for a really long time, and you can just mix it with soda water or something like that. So I ended up with all these bottles of different flavored shrubs on my doorstep. So I could use that kind of thing in here too. It's the same sort of idea, I guess. And now I need some garlic. So I'm going to use some more of my fresh garlic. And hard to know what is exactly equivalent to cloves here, but this is pretty potent. This is pretty fresh. So I'm just going to maybe put a heaping teaspoon in like that. And some cumin, which I put right over here. So I need 1/2 teaspoon of that. And a teaspoon of, ideally, Aleppo pepper flakes. But I am using my smoked pepper flakes. And I'm just going to put 1/2 teaspoon in case they are hotter than expected. There's a tablespoon of minced onion, and I had cut my onion up earlier, and I think I might have forgotten to put that in my salad. So I'll have to do that later when I eat it. I like to use red onion wherever I can, because red onion has more of the anthocyanins we were talking about earlier. And so it gives you a little extra boost. Tablespoon, so that'd be about a tablespoon. See? And 1/2 teaspoon of sumac. We have a really beautiful shop in town, and more of these little jars. They they have like a whole wall of shelves with nothing but spices in these beautiful jars. It's just gorgeous. So I was really happy to find some sumac in there. But that's another thing you can find very easily in Mediterranean delis. And then salt and pepper to taste, so I'll do that later. Before I put this in, I'll just mention a few more of my cookbook collection. So more Claudia Roden. This one covers a lot of territory, Mediterranean cookery. So lots of different countries featured, and she doesn't have it organized by country, just by recipe, because a lot of these recipes, like this particular dip, are found in different countries. A friend of mine who spent a lot of time in Crete used to say that Turkish food was just Greek food that was better prepared. So there are biases in how these things are prepared and how they are received. So this was obviously marketed when the Mediterranean diet became a big thing. It says features the Mediterranean diet recommended by the World Health Organization. When I was in Italy, we learned about the Mediterranean diet from a food historian who said, actually, we're a little bit misled when it comes to talking about the Mediterranean diet, because it was based on research done on Cretan men in the 1950s. And they do some things that that sedentary North Americans do not do when they are consuming the Mediterranean diet. So one of the things that kept them so healthy was that Crete is a very mountainous area. So they were walking up and down hills all the time. So that was a good thing, good for their hearts. There were a lot of religious, not fasts, but there were a lot of religious festivals where you don't eat meat. So they were really varying their diet and not being so predominantly meat oriented. And they also eat a lot of wild greens. And one of the things we did when we did our field trip to Greece was to Crete, was to actually do a day of foraging wild greens, and then we prepared a meal after that. And the people living in rural Crete still do a lot of that kind of foraging. And so the Mediterranean diet, as we know it, does include a lot of the foods that they would eat there. But of course, we're eating them out of season. We're not eating, a liter of olive oil a month or whatever the statistic is for Cretan men. And we're not doing the up and down the hill business or the wild green foraging. So we're getting a partially correct diet from that. But they're all good things. And then I'm hoping that you've all heard of Ottolenghi, Yotam Ottolenghi. He's a very big name in cookbooks right now, and he has a very passionate fan base. I am one of them. This is his Jerusalem cookbook, so he's taken a close look at some of the foods that you would find in Israel currently, and his ethos for cooking is to really blend his own cultures. You can tell by his name that he's of sort of mixed parentage. So he's half Italian and half Jewish. And he did grow up in Jerusalem, I believe. And he now lives in London, where he runs very successful restaurants. And I have had the good fortune to have a dear friend with whom I stay when I go to London, who lives around the corner from one of his shops, and they have amazing takeout foods from that place. It's just wonderful. So all his books are great. He has a new one out called Simple, I think. I may be one or two behind, but simple. One of the criticisms he had of his cookbooks was that there are so many ingredients, and he uses a lot of things that not everybody would have on their shelf all the time, like sumac and like preserved lemons and a lot of Middle Eastern spices and ingredients. But simple, I think all the recipes were meant to be 5 ingredients or something like that. So I still haven't got hold of that one yet, but I like Jerusalem a lot. It's very nice. And then this one, I haven't met Jeffrey Alford, but Naomi Dogood. I assume that they're related by marriage. This Flatbreads and Flavors is just one book I picked up when I heard Naomi Dogood speaking at it was a baking conference. I go to baking conferences when I'm able to travel. So she was making flatbreads at this. And I thought this was a flatbread cookbook, but in fact, it's not. It's all kinds of things. And it's arranged by where they have traveled and what food they have researched. So Morocco, Tunisia, and Ethiopia. There's great pictures in it. Where else have they been? There's just all kinds of really interesting things. Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, Eastern Mediterranean, Central Asia, China, Vietnam, and Malaysia. So all kinds of different ethnicities and all kinds of different foods in here. And they live in Toronto, I believe. Naomi does anyway. And so that's a good one for getting some international inspiration. Okay, so I'm just going to disappear off camera for a minute while I run my noisy machine. So hopefully it won't be too noisy at your end. Actually, why don't I just mute myself and then you won't hear it. Okay, so that's how long that takes to make. It's very quick and very easy and really lovely. We'll need a bit of salt, I think, but so pretty. So I haven't made it too fine. I wanted to have some texture there. So all these ingredients have their unique properties, but this is also going to be one of those dips that's, you know, high in fiber and because it's got the nuts, it's got some protein, and it's very pretty.